Hello everyone, this is Pino Trogo again from San Francisco State University. This is the Introduction to Drawing for Designers class in the School of Design. And today is September 8th, 2020, and we were going to talk about tools that you might need for this class, okay? So let's get started. I have a list and I will prepare a list for you, and of course different brands, you can get different tools from different brands. It's not really crucial, but some brands are better than others, so I hope YouTube doesn't mind me doing talking about brands. So the first thing we're going to talk about is pencils, and in the list that I'll send you there is a Lumograph pencil, and I believe it's a B. So this is pretty good pencils. For this little demo, I also will use these pencils called Blackwing. Okay, and I have three kinds, and they correspond to, oh, I thought I had three. I only have two. Oh, here it is. They correspond to three different hardnesses. I forget now which is which. Okay, anyway, you need pencils, so I would say you need to sketch, of course, HB, but also B, and these are the different hardnesses, yeah. So let's see, you need an eraser, although for sketching you don't want to use it that much. For drafting you might want to use it, and this one is a good one, Staedtler Mars plastic. Then you need a sharpener, and there's different kinds of sharpeners. You could get an electric one, and Panasonic used to make a fantastic sharpener that looked roughly like this, and you put the pencil there and it sharpened it automatically. Or you can get a manual one, and this one that from Blackwing also is a fantastic one. It has two blades, but they're not for different size pencils. They're for the same pencil, and it's got step 1 and step 2. And when you do the first step, it makes, I don't know if it's easy to see, but it just makes the lead stick out a lot, kind of like this. Okay. And then there's the second sharpener. The second hole will actually smoothen this to a nice point. So let's do that with the second, number 2. Oops. And there you go. Okay. And then what I do is I also just use my hand to smoothen it out even more. Okay. And when you use pencils, let's talk about that. You really should feel good about it. Like it shouldn't scrape, and it should feel like it's really moving nicely on the paper. Of course, the paper makes a difference too, and we'll talk about that. So when you hold the pencil, if it's long enough, then you can hold it like this, so it rests on this spot here on your hand instead of falling in if it's too short, right? So pencils. Of course, if you have just a pencil, that's okay too. You just have pencils. In this class, we're not going to use pens. Okay, no pens at all. Although if you were to get one, this is a good type. It's called micron or micron, and it comes in different thicknesses. All right, so I'm gonna scratch off my list. Eraser. Okay, I'll jump to a different kind of pencil, which is the one we use for drafting, and there's different names for it. Mechanical pencil, mechanical lead holder, because it holds the lead. Okay, and usually I think it's a 1.5 millimeters thick. But the lead is really not lead. It's actually graphite, and with different proportions of clay, you can make it harder or softer. So for our purposes, for our drawings, we want 2H leads, okay? And again, I believe they're 1.5 millimeter, and they fit this type of, there's different kinds, but what you don't want, and I don't have one here now, is the kind where you just go click, 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 and the lead is very thin. And the problem with that is that it's shaped somewhat like this. So the lead in those is always kind of square, even when it's thin. Whereas with this, you can sharpen it with a gadget that's a sharpener, or you can use sandpaper, which I'm going to show now. And if you have a little bit of sandpaper, you can sharpen the lead like that. Now they also make this kind of little pads of, you might have seen them. This lifts up, and here's your sandpaper, and it looks like a little tool like that. But you can just grab a piece of sandpaper, and fine is good. So this is 2020, it's sandpaper. This is the kind you use for metal. I don't remember what number this is, but so you definitely want to go from rougher to smoother. And what you can do with the lead, bring it out, and then you just go like this. And what I'm doing is I'm turning it. Okay, I'm turning it as I'm dragging it. Well, actually, you can start. So you do a little bit, then you turn a little bit, then you go again, then you turn again, and so forth. Until you get a nice point. So the difference between this type of lead holder and the ones, again, that are very popular and you just click, 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 and the leads are very thin, is that it doesn't break as easily. And I can also make a point that's super, 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 super sharp, much sharper than the one you can make. Now what we need is a little bit of something to kind of get rid of the excess, okay? Then be careful, because this is sharp, and you just bring it. So I'm pushing so that I let it in. The gadget I was talking about that's mechanical, it's a little expensive, and it looks like this. It's like a little barrel. Sorry, it's got a little attachment here. The pencil goes in at an angle, and that causes it to go against, it's a little off here, go against a grinder that's inside. Okay, so what happens is let's see, the pencil comes in this way. Well, just the lead comes in, and by turning, this point actually ends up being, right, because it's going to turn like that, so you end up having a really nice smooth point. Okay, and then here in this gadget there is like a little filter, looks like a cigarette filter, where you can then clean up your lead after you sharpen it. Okay, it's a more expensive, so you don't have to buy it. You can just make do with a couple of pieces of sandpaper. Okay, let's look at the list. Okay, so with that, you're also going to need a couple of triangles for some of the technical drawings that we're going to do. Let's see, I have to try to keep the same stack of paper here, because I've made my focus fixed, so I don't get all that yo-yo effect. So it's triangles for me, having grown up in Italy and having gone to art school in high school, is a little bit of a sore spot, because I've had a really hard time finding good triangles. Okay, the best one really that I found are Alvin, and they're this kind. These are smoke tint. They come in different transparencies. And these are smaller than the one you probably should get, but they could also work. Let's see, these are Yeah, 8 inches and 6 inches. Well, they might be okay. These are 9 and 7. So what's good about this particular brand is that they're square, and I'll explain what that means in a second. These also have inches, but the trouble with that is that oftentimes they're not as precise as they should be. So for example, if I compare these to, let's see, this is a T-square, by the way. I'll talk about that in a second too. So every ruler is different. You would say, why? Well, these happen to be exactly right. This is good because the inches really match. But recently I tested another one, and I found that it was actually a little bit off. Okay, so I'm going to test now 8 inches. It's just a hair, and you can't quite see it, but in this triangle, 8 inches are a little bit longer than 8 inches on my metal ruler. Okay, which is to say that if I were to work together with these tools, with this set of tools, sometimes I measure with the metal ruler, sometimes with this, and I might be a little off. Now, granted, you're probably not going to design something that nowadays would be, you know, used directly from your drawing. You know, there'd probably be a machine that makes it. But still, if you're trying to make things correspond, this could be a problem. And I forget what the brand of these ones is. What I do like about these ones is that the inch markings and the centimeter markings, which we'll use sometimes, do not start in the corner, because what happens is the corner usually sometimes gets chipped off. And so if your markings start there, which would be 0, that's a problem, because then I lose it. It's also really hard to make a mark on the corner. You're always going to go off one side or the other. It's much better to have the mark start later, because then I can clearly pick it up. Okay, so that's a good feature of this particular triangle. But let's not worry for a moment about that. Let's stick to this. So you definitely need two. They should be proportional, so you can see this one is the same width, the same length on the two edges. This one is longer, but if I overlap them, they're roughly the same. Don't get two triangles that look, you know, maybe like this. That shouldn't be good. Okay, and the triangles are, one is called 30-60, and that means degrees. This would be 30 degrees, and then that would be 60, and then this one is 90. Okay, and in the 45, that's 45, this 45 degrees, and this is 90 right there. So this is called 45-45. This is called 30-60, and that's because you get the angles from, there is a tool called a protractor. You probably remember it from middle school, where the little tick marks define the degrees. So you start at 0, and after a full circle, you get to 360. Okay, so if I were to put my triangles on this thing, let's see, it would be the opposite. Yeah, this might be 30 degrees. This might be 45 degrees. Right, you see the triangles here, and this is of course 90 degrees. The first thing you want to do with a triangle is figure out if it is square, and that sounds funny, of course, because is it a square or is it a triangle? It is a triangle, but by square I mean check if this angle right here is a true square. The way you do that is and I'm going to use now my T-square, which I'm going to run against the edge of my desk, of my board here, which you can't see, but I run in this way so that I get parallel lines, and also gives me a nice place to work, and it doesn't move. Okay, so what we want to do is test if it's true square, and for that I'm going to use this better pens, this better, more precise. I'm gonna make it really dark. So now what I do is I flip. Okay, I flip this, so I have that position. Now I'm going to flip it over this axis, and what I want to get is I want to get exactly the same line. If I don't, it means that my triangle is more like that, or like that. In other words, it might be coming out or it might be falling in, and hopefully it's perfectly straight. So if I flip this and I check, I can see that it is good. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, once again, go like that, flip it, test it, and I'm going to test now the other one. And since I'm showing triangles, here's how you work with them, whether you have a T-square or just the two triangles. You hold one tool, in this case it's a T-square, so it's pretty firm already. And as you move this triangle, you keep a couple of other fingers perhaps open so that you can then lock it and hold it when you do your line, so it doesn't move when you're doing the line. So again, I'm testing that, and it's true square, and that's very nice. Okay, since I did introduce the T-square, which again you probably all know, this is a nice one. It's again from Alvin, and I'll make a list. It's an 18-inch one, and now I can't really show it in the video fully, but what you can also get is a board, a nice drafting board that's a light board, and you can have your T-square move along this straight edge on the side. Okay, these unfortunately are kind of expensive, the nice ones, but it's a very useful. This is 18 by 24, and I can't show it in full here, but imagine that I would be using this underneath here. They also make nicer, well, they're nice because they're at an angle, so they might have a little foot there. Okay, and if you can afford it, if you have some extra money, you could buy one of these. They come with a parallel edge that can go up and down, against which you can put then your triangles, and it makes for a very nice working. The only thing I found is that they usually don't make them with a nice wood surface. They make them with a very shiny formica surface, which is not ideal. In fact, what I'm doing even now is I'm padding my drawings a little bit so I get a nicer, softer surface. Yeah, so again, the T-square is a nice tool to have. It's, you know, in the old days, they used to make really solid out of wood and metal. And now, of course, plastic is not so great, but aluminum is still good. And if you don't get a T-square, you don't have to get a T-square, get at least a metal ruler, okay, a straight edge. And this is a 15-inch straight edge made by Office Mate. It's got a cork surface underneath, so it doesn't slide, stays. On the other hand, it loses a little bit of the cork, so that's a little bit of a disadvantage. So you need a ruler with inches, especially if you don't have markings on your triangle, and definitely get one that also has centimeters and millimeters. Okay, let's see if I can show an inch is about 24 millimeters. Okay, and because you're going to need to measure for some of the projects. If you don't have this set up, or if you don't have, let's say, a separate board, it's really nice to have a board, because it doesn't matter what environment you're in, you can always have it to work. So then the way you would use your T-square is like so, right? So you just slide your T-square up and down your board. So let's assume now that I have neither of these things, or at least I have a ruler to measure. The way then you would want to use your triangles is, this is a kind of substitute T-square, one of them. Again, normally when I draft, I would be using this tool, the mechanical lead holder. But for the video, so it's clearer, so it shows, I'm going to use one of these soft pencils, which is not normally what you would do. Okay. So I'll show how to quickly make a square using these tools. What I might do is I might start by getting a reading of the edge of my paper. Okay, let's say like that. Then I align my triangle, and I move now across while I hold this. Now, to hold this so that it doesn't shift around, what I do is I put my hand a little bit on the paper, a little bit on the triangle, and then again I leave a couple of fingers free so that I can then, right now it's free to move the top triangle, and then I lock it, and then I make my line so that it's firm when I, okay. So how would I do, let's assume that's my reading again. What I could do with a square, to make a square, is I could start like that. Let's say I want to make a 3-inch square. Make a mark, and the trick is to not to make too many measurements. You don't want to like make a line and then measure from there to there like this, make another point here, make another line, etc., etc. Things are going to get skewed if you do that. Instead, you start with one good marking, and here I'll show you how to, by turning my triangle now, I'm going to get one other horizontal. So I take my reading there, right? Let's see, like that. And here then I have quite enough room. So I flip again, and now I can do these. I can draw a diagonal. So you can see you can do a lot of stuff with just 2 triangles. So because this is 45 degrees, this gives me the same width. And now that I have that marking, I can finish off my square by, so I only took 2 measurements. Well, 1 measurement, really, 2 points, that's it. Everything else I did using the triangles, and you should get into the habit of doing this because your drawings are going to be more precise. Again, I'm holding hand on paper on the triangle, a couple of fingers maybe free, so that when I slide this triangle, I can then lock it when I'm ready to draw my line. Okay, and it's a good idea to cross your lines so you know exactly where your points are. Let's see. Oh, let me quickly show how to sharpen a pencil, a regular pencil, if you don't have a nice gadget like this one. And that brings us actually to another tool, which is a cutting knife. And regardless of what other teachers might say, I'm pretty stubborn and adamant about this. This is the best knife you should get, and you should not use an X-acto knife. And an X-acto knife is the classic tool that looks kind of like that, and it's got a little point there. They're dangerous. They're not really useful for our purposes in design anymore, because they break, and they were meant to cut on glass from the days when people had to do layout, paste up with paper and glue and all kinds of things. Instead, what you should get is this knife, which is called Olfa, which is made in Japan, and it's been around since maybe late 60s. And the way you sharpen this guy is that it has a series of blades like this, which are pre-scored. Okay, so what you want to do is snap one off by using this device on the end, which has a little opening. You bring this just so that it lines up, and then you just snap it. It's very safe, and this is mechanical, but it has no screws, and it's really very, very good. It just very efficient. Okay, so this is the kind, and then you can also buy extra blades if you if you wish. They're very sharp, so be careful. As they say on TV, beware of imitations, because this is really the real McCoy here. X-acto brand makes a knife similar to this, but it's not as good. So here's how you sharpen your pencil by hand. You actually push with your thumb that's holding the pencil. So, because that way you have control to get started. And you shouldn't rush. Now, because I'm videotaping, I tend to rush. It's not a good idea. And you do this at first because it's hard to control the force of your hand. This is way too much force to control. And then after you get the main point, then you can go slightly, lighter there on the tip. Okay. Now this takes time, of course, but it's actually a good relaxing exercise. Kind of meditative. And once you do that, then you can still make it, again, I'm turning the pencil here, make it better, make it more pointy like that. Oops. This. So that's the knife, the Olfa knife. So let's talk about paper a little bit. And you really need two kinds. And normally at school, I would have given you a third kind, but unfortunately we're not at school. So you need sketching paper, which is 74 grams per square meter, which is the European way. It's 50 pound. This is a good pad I got. It's from Canson, 9x12. Again, 50 pound. 50 pound in America means that a ream of this paper of a certain size weighs 50 pounds, which is not a great way to define paper. The best way is to say, okay, how much does a sheet weigh if it is 1 square meter? Okay. And 1 square meter is, I forget the dimensions, how you get 1 square meter, but one sheet of paper that is 1 square meter weighs 74 grams. And it's a little hard because in America, of course, we don't use grams, but anyway, sketching paper is roughly, it feels like you're a good stationery paper. And if you get a pad, you can rip a sheet from that. It shouldn't be too smooth. Then you need Bristol paper. This is, again, a good one. It's Canson, it's smooth. And this is heavier. This is about 3 times as heavy. And it's for, you can hear from the sound that they make, like the bread in Ratatouille. That's how you tell if bread is good. for drafting. So these would be for drawings that require precision. Okay. And actually, since we're doing that, I'm going to quickly show how to do. I'm going to take a sheet and I'm going to show how to do the detail of the title block, which is at 1/2 inch from the edge, and then 3/4 inches. And I'll do this really quickly. Many of the other videos show this. For these, you might even use the paper as your guide. In other words, I'm using the edge of the paper. Even though you can't be sure that the paper itself is square. So if I now align my triangles, yeah, they fit nicely and snug, but sometimes they're not. So this would be my title block, 1/2 inch from the edge, and then this is 3/4 inches. So that's 1/2 inch, and this is 3/4, and that's 1/2 inch. And then inside that, you would put a couple of thin lines that you can hardly see them. And in those, now I would write my information, which you could do freehand nicely if you can. The drawing information, that is, for which, again, there is a sample in iLearn. So again, this is the drafting paper. And then the last kind, well, actually not the last kind, we need tracing paper. And this really is the bread and butter, I think, for designers. Tracing paper is just thin, inexpensive paper, but still pretty strong, which is fantastic to just get things done really quickly, because it has this nice, in-between sort of transparency. So if I need to, trace something, I can do that. But perhaps then I want to isolate, and all I have to do is just lift it up, like in Photoshop, opacity layers, except it's much faster than Photoshop. So that's tracing paper. There's different qualities too. Again, this is a good, you don't want an expensive one. This is a good one. And this is about 40 grams. It's like what used to be called onion skin that people used to make copies of the letters that they used to type on their typewriters using carbon paper, from which you get carbon copies, which is when you CC somebody. But for that, you need a special layer to transfer that image. So tracing paper, and let's see what else we have. Oh, and then there's even another kind of paper that's called vellum. And unfortunately, I don't have a piece handy now, but vellum is actually quite transparent, but also quite strong. This is not it. This is, so let's summarize. You need sketching paper. Then you need drafting paper or drawing. Then you need tracing paper. And then vellum, which really is a misnomer, because vellum is either, I forget if it was the calf skin or the other animal from which they made sheets of writing material before paper was, came into widespread use. But it's a super high quality, 100% rug, and it's more transparent than this. But that would be used to do a final drawing of something after perhaps having a sketch underneath, right? So let's say I have a drawing that's like that, and let's say that for some reason here I just need some parts of it later. I might finish my drawing like that, perhaps, and that would be my final clean drawing on vellum. When we return to school, there's some of that at school. And in terms of the weights, I'm going to use the, let's see, tracing is, tracing paper is 25 pound, and it's 41 grams per square meter. Then sketching is 50 pound or 74 grams per square meter. And drafting is, let's see what it says, 100 pound and 260 grams. It's funny because they actually list the grams on the pad, but they don't list grams for what. And what it is a square meter. So if you take a sheet of paper that is 1 square meter, 1 square meter is like a yoga mat, more or less. That's the size. Then it's so many grams, half a kilo or about, no, a quarter kilo or about a pound. So it's fairly heavy. Let's see, 206, yeah, half a pound. And then vellum, it's probably gonna be maybe 40 pound. So those are the pads. And right now we're working with 9 by 12. So let's just stick to that. Sometimes the assignments might say 1/2 by 11, but let's just stick to 9 by 12. Okay. Okay, we need a compass. And now that's a little bit again of a sore point because it's hard to get a good compass that is, not too expensive. I got this one. It has this sort of funny, I don't know, psychedelic thing. I don't think they do anything, but, and it has a wheel, which is good if it holds the tension and it doesn't all of a sudden start moving on its own, which would not be good if you're trying to make a circle and all of a sudden this moves. Okay. Now with a compass, the first thing we're going to do is make sure that the tip here actually is not shaped like this one, which comes off the box. So it's got these little wheels here to tighten things. And also, unfortunately, this pointer is not as sharp as I would have liked. But this is what I could get. It's shaped like that. I like the ones that are like this, where it's very, 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 very pointy. Anyway, the point shouldn't be like this. The point here should be like that, like a chisel, which then is going to get much closer to the pointing point, so to speak. So what we'll do is we'll take that off right away. And that also might be too soft. That might be HB. And what we want is, again, 2H. Okay. So I'm not sure what's in here now in this little container in terms of hardness, but what I'll do instead is I'll take a piece from my lead holder, like that. And I'll put it in there. And this is where you definitely need, for these there is no tool. You have to have a piece of sandpaper. So we're going to stick it out a little bit more than the point. Right there, tighten it. Now I have to find my sandpaper. There it is. So you start with a coarser, of course. So when you do that, it's hard to see now from the camera angle, but what I do is I'm going sideways, but I'm keeping it really always at the same. So if this is the paper, I'm keeping my compass like this as I move it back and forth. And I try not to tip it this way or this way. Also not to go too high on the angle or too low, otherwise you're gonna hit the metal. What we're doing is we're cutting out an ellipse out of that cylinder, right? Which is our lead. And I kept it a little bit too long, so I'll bring it back in. It's important that this angle stays nice and so it doesn't turn around. Anyway, this gives me a good sharp edge. It's almost like, think of it as a blade, like as a blade in, for example, an ice skating shoe. So when that blade comes, when that blade circles, it's always going to have this nice edge going around that circle. Okay, it's only touching one little point. All right. And the way you use your compass, and the size should be, I think this can make up to 10 inches. I forgot. Let's quickly check it. If I open it all the way, let's see, roughly. Yeah, that's 6 inches. So actually I can make a 12-inch circle with this compass. But for now, for the demo, let's make one that is maybe 6 inches. So I measure 3 inches. What I like to do is I like to draw a line so I can make a little cross. Okay. In other words, if I make a point on the paper and say that's where I'm going to put my compass, well, who knows where exactly that point is, right? But if I do a line and I do a crossing, now that's much more identifiable. Okay. So let's see, make a nice cross there. Make another marking. So that's 3 inches. And now with the compass, how you hold it is like this. You can't just like throw a dart, so to speak, and try, and hit that right away. I mean, you're never going to get it. So what I do is I grab it down low like this, and then I use both hands to help me locate it. And when I'm good with it, okay, then I go up and I hold it like this. And now what I have to do is I have to measure. And I want to measure by doing trial and error. So if I'm pretty close, I try and I say, oh, okay, is that good? It's hard to see now, but it may not still be so good. In fact, I can see that my line is a little bit off like that. Okay, so I want to make sure that I really hit it just like that. So the best way to do that is to just keep trying until you get it just exactly where you want. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And when you're happy, then you do your circle. I'm going to do it. Now, for videos, 2H, it's not so great because it doesn't show up very much. But for you, you definitely want to use that hardness, which is hard, as opposed to HB. Okay, so now it's a little bit hard to show from the camera angle, but what we want to do is, once you get it all set up, don't hold both of them because that will make, force the compass to do something funny. So instead, you want to work from the top here. Okay, and you want to literally spin it almost like you're spinning a top. Of course, you're going to have some resistance. And what you want to do, again, it's hard to show, but I'm dragging it. I'm dragging it like I might be using a regular broom, and I'm dragging, and then when I reverse, I drag it the opposite way. Okay, I don't want to push it. I don't want to push it like this, like I might be using one of those big brooms, the janitors use at school to clean, because that might kick it off the point. All right, see, this is pushing. Okay, so that's how you use the compass briefly. And the last thing, I think, are a few miscellaneous optional things. It would be good if you had some tape, drafting tape. You know, it could be the blue tape that painters used, or drafting, which is kind of brown looking. This is blue. Oh, this is actually called artist tape, so this is fancy. But and you just need tape because you need to sometimes tape your paper when you're doing drafting that require, you know, the sheet to stay put. And the other videos individually, different drawings will show that. So drafting tape. A bone folder is a fantastic tool that every graphic designer should have, but also every product designers too. It's a piece of bone, literally shaped. I mean, a bone that's been shaped into this shape, and it's nice because it's good for folding and bending, and it's also good for scoring. And by that I mean that if I wanted to make a perfect fold here, let's assume this might be a little thicker paper, I can score. I get a nice edge, which I can then okay. The reason it's better than a piece of plastic is because it doesn't burn. The bond doesn't burn. It also doesn't leave a marking. Although it will mark your paper, it will make it shiny. It's hard to see here. So sometimes if you're doing something fancy, you want to protect the thing that you're, you know, bending and folding. So that's a bone folder. You need something to cut on, and this is the back of my pad, and that's fine for cutting, but because it is wood, it will make your blade dull fast. If you can help it, don't use the plastic to cut, because that you might, first of all, you might cut your fingers because it might jump the plastic, and also it will ruin the ruler. So instead use a metal ruler. Okay. When you cut, see, let me cut something that I don't need. Yeah, make sure you cut and you protect the part that you want to save. In this case, my left side. Okay, that's how you cut. You want a soft surface. You don't want glass or anything like that. And I don't have one to show now, but those mats are sometimes called self-healing healing mats. They're sort of semi-hard rubber, and what happens is when you cut with the knife, you know, the cut will kind of heal, and it won't leave a groove. So I think that's it. Yeah, another tool that, let's see, that you really don't need for the class, but you maybe should be familiar with it, which is an architect scale, which has preset readings when you're scaling something down. So you might have something that is, you know, half scale, so, or where it's a big drawing and half an inch equals a foot in architectural drawings. That's the architect scale. I think that's it. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just summarize them all again by bringing them onto the stage, so to speak. And grab one of my pencils. Okay, yeah, the one I had made. So let me see. Yeah, different kinds of pencils again for drafting. Eventually, we'll use at the very end. We'll use colors too for a couple of drawings. And if you're eager to get colored pencils, Prismacolors soft and with a square section like this. And then let's see, the other ones are called color eraser. And these are shaped like that, the section that is, and these are a little bit harder. Color, forget the exact name. Anyway, this is probably enough if you don't want to get something else. So HB, the hardness, B, maybe 2B. But for drafting, we want a mechanical pencil, right? The kind where you sharpen it with a little sandpaper or with a little tool. For the pencils, if you can get the sharpener, it's fantastic with the 2 steps we talked about. And let's see, you want to get 2 triangles. Okay, these don't have markings. If you get the ones with markings, and I think this is called art triangle, these are useful, but as we saw, the markings, they're not like 100%. And whatever you do, you need to get 2 that are proportional, okay, to each other. These was 6 and 5, and this or 7 and 6, and this is 9 and 7, meaning the long edge. A T-square is always useful. So this is a 15-inch one. No, actually, this is an 18-inch one. Sorry. Yeah, if you're going to get one, probably this is the right size. You need a straight edge or ruler with inches and centimeters. This is steel, but I actually prefer, I don't have it here, but I prefer aluminum, so it would be more like this. It's also lighter. We talked about how if you had extra funds, you could buy a drafting board. Then you need the pads of papers. So Bristol paper for the drawing, as in like technical good drawing. You need sketching paper for everyday sketching, and you need tracing paper for quick stuff. Then you need a compass. And by the way, speaking of compasses, ask your parents, grandparents, relatives. There might be an engineer or an architect or someone who just had to buy a compass in the old days before computers, and they might just have beautiful compass sets that come in these like jewel cases with like red velvet lining, and the compass might be in that case. And it will be fantastic if you can find one of those. And often they come from Germany, and they have like a little pull thing that you pull to open them. So just double check to make sure that perhaps you don't already have a beautiful compass that is just waiting to be resuscitated, so to speak, or put to work again. The knife, very important, okay? And I'll talk more about how to use it, but use this one. Don't get X-acto knife. And I'm going to write that one more time. No X-acto knife. What you want is Olfa. Okay, that's the knife you want to get. A cutting pad, a cutting mat, but you can always use the back of your drafting pad, except again, this is wood practically. I mean, all paper is more or less wood, unless it's cotton. And this will make the blade dull, but in the absence of a mat, you can use that. And then optionally, you could get a bone folder, fantastic tool. And that's it for now. So I'll see you in the next video.